Hi, thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining us for another live webinar on Stop School Bullying. This is our fifth webinar on the bullying campaign that we're doing this year, where we teach children, parents, teachers, and just everyone in general, educate them on bullying, what it is, how to prevent it, what to do if you're involved in it, or so what to do if your children are involved in it. Today we have another webinar by Alice Chan entitled Existing Models of Change, a look at solutions to religious bullying in the US today. I met Alice at an anti-bullying conference, and she had a very unique perspective on bullying. Her dissertation was about religious-based bullying in schools. And so I was very intrigued by her presentation. So I invited her to come and do a webinar for us, and she was happy to do it. A little bit about Alice. Alice is a teacher, a researcher, and evaluation consultant based in Canada. Previously, she was in middle school. She was a middle school teacher. She witnessed religious bullying in her public school classroom, which raised a passion to protect the religious and non-religious identities of students in North American public schools. In sharing her research on religious bullying, she hopes to help students, teachers, parents, community leaders, and policymakers understand religious bullying and its impact on individuals and society and its relation to religious literacy. She has a really great website called alicechan.org. It's in the description of the video. If you want to check out her website, she has a lot more information and resources available regarding this very specific topic of religious-based bullying in schools. As always, we remind you that this is a free workshop that we have, free webinar that we provide every month. Please donate to us. Go to our website, www.icnacsj.org. Please give us a donation so we can keep doing this work for free and providing this free information to the public. So your donations and contributions do help us keep this thing going. And from there, I'm going to give it to Alice.
Hi, everyone. Can you see me?
Yep, we can see you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Rameez, for inviting me to this presentation to share this webinar with you. It's a great pleasure to be here with you, and I guess in a way on behalf of ICNA today to share what's been happening in my life these past 5 years and the research that I've done. So before I begin all that, to share the slides with you, I want to introduce myself a bit in addition to what Rameez has shared. Really, why is a Canadian doing research in the US about religious bullying? What is happening here? And as Rameez said, it has a lot to do with my background as a middle school teacher. I taught middle school briefly after doing my master's. And while I was teaching middle school in the area that I grew up in this public education system, I came across religious bullying. At that time in 2011, my dad unexpectedly passed away as well. And that hit me really hard. As a Christian, I really leaned to my faith, my religious background to understand how to make sense of everything. And that's exactly when I saw religious bullying happening in my classroom. And for someone whose religious background and identity is so important to me, I knew how important it was to my students. And when I saw them bullied for that reason, I knew there was something I had to do. Really, bullying, all teachers know that bullying needs to be addressed. But when it came to religious bullying in a public school environment, I was stuck. I grew up in that environment. I had never seen it. I just didn't know what to do. And but I knew something had to be done. And so this is really where my research stems from, and why it's so important to me, and why I know it's important to so many students and people today. And so what I'd like to share with you today is a very brief snapshot of the research that I found within these past 5 years, the conversations that I've had. And I'd like to let you know that while I show you the slides, there will be links to them, but with these links, you'll get access to them later because I'll be sharing my presentation with Rameez. He'll post it online, and then you can have access to these links and explore these solutions more yourself. So with that, let's begin this presentation. So let me just drop the slides. Okay. So here we go. Thank you again for joining me on this presentation titled Existing Models of Change, a look at solutions to religious bullying in the US today.
Okay. Alice, you want to go back to the slides? I think they came off. Just
Oh,
go
they
back.
came off.
You
Oh,
stopped
okay.
sharing it. You probably accidentally pressed it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let me try again.
Yep,
Do
there
you
you
see
go.
the slides now? Yep. Okay. And this is good? You can still see the slides?
Yeah, we can just
Okay.
see it. We can see it now.
Great, thank you. One thing that I forgot to share is with respect to why is a Canadian doing research in the US? And really what I've come to know is whatever happens in the US really influences us in Canada and vice versa in terms of communication between religious groups and education in general. There's a lot that's happening in Canada that is informing parts of conversations in the US and likewise. And through my research on religious bullying, I'm really looking at what's happening in Quebec, Canada, as well as California. And that's really what's led me to do more work in the US and understand what's happening there and facilitate the discussion that we're having today. So today, in particular, we're going to talk about three main things. Firstly, what is religious bullying? And then secondly, review some preventative solutions that already exist. And then third, very briefly look at responsive solutions that have been discussed in previous webinar presentations in this series. So with these three items, there's three objectives. First, I'd like to inform you of what's happening, and then also to provide these solutions to encourage and inspire you to understand what you may be able to do in your community. And then thirdly, just quickly reiterate very briefly some of the solutions and ways to respond in your context. So all the solutions that I will share with you later today really stem from these religious and non-sectarian nonprofit organizations. Some of them are large and national in scope, and some of them are localized in certain counties or regions. And really, I've chosen to share these programs and solutions with you today is because I want to relate this back to the conference that where I met Ramiz. So in December 2017, we both attended the National Interfaith Anti-Bullying Summit in Washington, D.C. And in attendance there were Muslim, Sikh, Jewish, Christian, and non-religious individuals. And one person in particular raised that they were really thankful for the summit, but they really wish that they had known about all these groups and initiatives beforehand. They really wish that if they had known, then they could learn from one another and work with one another and support each other. And so that's what I'm trying to do with you today. I'm trying to share them with you so that you are also aware of the different initiatives that are happening in many parts of the US. Each context, of course, is very different across the country. So what I've tried to do is include representation from the most populated states, while also giving examples of how smaller towns and unexpected locales are also supporting people. So today, I believe most people on the call are probably adults or community leaders. There's a lot that I can share with teachers, but that won't be my focus today. I will focus the conversation and put more emphasis to solutions that parents and perhaps other adult community members can use. So the first section of our conversation today will really focus on religious bullying, understanding what it is and the nuances within it. So regardless of the content basis in a bullying incident, it's important to understand that the expression and the effects of bullying are all the same across all of them. And that is that there is always a power imbalance between two parties. One party may, whether it's one group or an individual, intentionally aims to degrade another party, again, a group or individual. And this can be expressed or manifested in physical ways through pushing, shoving, or kicking, verbal ways such as derogatory slurs or using specific tones in one's voice to put another person down. So that's very subtle, but really people are very clever, unfortunately, when they're being mean to one another. So that is also a way where bullying can be manifested. And really in social ways when students or others are being segregated and excluded, or of course through cyberbullying that can be seen through online texting or online posts. And many people think bullying really is a schoolyard problem, but several studies have shown that bullying that an individual experiences in childhood can really affect them in adulthood and affect the next generation of children in their family too. These effects include a variety of psychological and physical ailments that are listed on the right-hand side of your screen here. You'll see that this includes lower self-esteem, poor mental health, depression, and many other things that are listed here. And in most extreme cases, it can lead to suicidal ideation or suicide. These are important effects to remember and understand because sometimes, realistically, students do not realize that they are going through this problem themselves. These effects could arise among those who experience the bullying or perpetuate the bullying, commit the bullying, and to those who witness bullying as well. For example, in a study that I came across, an adult who witnessed bullying in their youth, they need to undergo counseling because they really struggle with the fact that they did not in their youth respond to the bullying that they saw. And that's just one example. This really highlights the fact that bullying is a societal issue, not just for the schoolyard or bystanders within the schoolyard, but really even for adults later on and how they have relationships and interact with other people. And while these manifestations and effects are associated to every kind of content-based bullying, such as racial bullying, bullying based on sexual orientation, disability, language, or religion, as we're talking about today, it is important to recognize that each type of bullying has its own nuances. So let's look at the nuances and the complexity within religious bullying. So religious bullying, what is it? It really occurs when a religious or religiously unaffiliated person intentionally degrades another person on for two possible reasons, or a mix of the two reasons. Firstly, here it's listed that it can be based on the individual's actual or perceived religious or religiously unaffiliated identity. So for example, a person with brown-colored skin may be presumed to be a Muslim. So unfortunately, for that reason, another person will bully them. Or one person bullies another because they are wearing a turban to express their Sikh identity. And really, on this basis, you can see that it's very much based on appearance, whether it's appearance of dress or appearance of race. Secondly, religious bullying can occur based on the tenets of one's belief. So, for example, a Roman Catholic person could bully a Lutheran person because of a specific Lutheran tenet or an interpretation of that tenet. Or an atheist student could bully a Hindu student based on the premise that Hindus have many deities. So in this sense, religious bullying can really occur within religious groups, between religious groups, and between religious and non-religious groups as well. Excuse me. In my research within California, I spoke with a Muslim mother, and she was telling me that during the US elections in 2016, her son was bullied on the playground by non-Muslim peers. Unfortunately, when he wasn't on the playground, he was at the mosque. He was also bullied there because he was racially different from his friends there at the mosque, and his parents were of various ethnic backgrounds. So racially, the boy didn't look like he was from North African, Arab, or South Asian descent, and for that reason, people were bullying him at the mosque as well. So really, in each circumstance, and all these examples that I've shared, there is a power imbalance where one group intentionally degrades another, whether it's based on one's actual belief or how they appear, how they look. So here on this slide, we're now looking at religious bullying statistical data, what has been found since 2014. So in 2014, the Sikh Coalition published a report called Go Home Terrorist, a report where it's shared findings from over 1,000 student surveys, focus groups, and interviews across Washington State, Indiana, California, and Massachusetts. And this group found that 1 in 3 Sikh students were bullied for their belief. Similarly, in 2016, the Hindu American Foundation published reports that shared that 1 in 3 Hindu students were also bullied for their belief. In 2015, the Council of American Islamic Relations published a report specifically about California students, where they surveyed 621 Muslim students. And in this study, they found that 1 in 2 Muslim students in California were bullied for being Muslim. And so in all 3 circumstances, in all 3 reports, many students also shared that they were scared to report instances of bullying, and they faced educators that did not respond. More recently, in 2017, the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding conducted a survey in January and found that 42% of Muslim parents they interviewed had school-age children who were bullied. In the same study, they found that 23% of the Jewish parents said the same thing, compared to 10% of the parents among the general public. Unfortunately, among the Muslim parents, they also shared that 25% of bullying their children experience stem from teachers or school officials. These are the most recent findings that I'm aware of. And I know that groups such as the Hindu American Foundation, in a report that I'm working with them, and other organizations like them are probably working on getting more updated data to understand what's happening to youth today. So as we consider the effects of bullying, we need to also understand how aspects of society influence the child's development. So here in this image here, I'm showcasing the ecological systems theory from psychologist Yuri Breckenridge. Many scholars doing research on bullying are using and adapting this theory to have this social ecological framework to help us understand how aspects of many systems in our society influence the students, so that the student who lives within their microsystem, whether it's a school or their home, is also influenced by their community, the government, and cultures and values that incorporate all of these systems that are within the macro system. So to address religious bullying, it's important to examine all of these systems. So we're going to do that a bit now. As religious bullying is still relatively new, a lot of people don't even know that it exists. There is a lack of statistical data on its occurrences in many different parts of the country, across many different groups. And there is no long-term data on microaggressions or forms of discrimination that happen. So what we're going to do now is to consider the US data on hate crimes in the following slides to understand what's happening and in the greater, in the meso system of the society. In this slide here, we're looking at the progression of hate crimes based on single bias from 2013 to 2016, as reported to agencies and collected by the FBI. Here, a single bias incident is defined as an incident in which one or more offense types are motivated by the same bias. So from this chart, we can see that race-based incidents are really the highest. At the same time, I do want to point your attention to the fact that the FBI, as of 2015, consolidated the data for race, ethnicity, and ancestry. So that's why under the third column, or the third category from the left here, ethnicity, you'll only see 2 bars of information. It's because 2015 and 2016 are now lumped into the first category of race. And so the numbers are higher there. For religion in particular, you'll see that the incidences in relation to religion, they rose approximately 120% from 2013 to 2016, so that in 2016, incidents based on religious bias comprised of almost 21% of all the hate crimes that happened across the US. So here on this slide, this chart further breaks down the data to show the hate crimes towards specific religious groups. In 2015, a number of data points were added here, such as the anti-Eastern Orthodox, anti-other Christian, anti-Mormon, anti-Sikh, anti-Hindu, anti-Buddhist, and anti-Jehovah Witnesses hate crimes. So that's why the data for these groups are not as visible in the chart and only show 2 years versus 4 years of data in other categories. But on this chart, there are 3 clear points that I want to highlight. Firstly, the rates for anti-Jewish hate crimes continue to be the highest, despite Jewish people being approximately 2% of the American population in 2013. And this is based on Pew Research Center data. So of course, this is really concerning given their small population. And secondly, there is a prominent spike in anti-Islamic hate crimes. So you can see that in 2013, 165 offenses were reported compared to almost 400 offenses that were reported in 2016, marking an over 200% increase in offenses. Thirdly, the FBI documented 7 anti-Sikh offenses occurring in 2016. However, our review of the Sikh Coalition report shows that many incidences happen, and it raises the question of perhaps realistically, if we know the youth are not reporting what's happening, perhaps the adults are not reporting as well. And so we can consider that possibility for Sikh, Hindu, and Muslim adults, as this data coincides with the sentiments that youth have shown in the reports in these groups. So really, what I'm trying to say is that this chart shows us information, but I'm not confident that it's representative. It only shows the reported hate crimes, not all the hate crimes that did exist or that did occur. This final chart that we're going to look at is of particular interest to us as we talk about youth, because it shows that the location of each incident, it shows the location of each incident that occurred based on religious bias. So various locations are of concern to us here, such as the idea that hate crimes would occur near one's home, but highlighted in yellow is our area of greatest concern, especially for me as an educator, because this is the increasing rate of incidents on school or college campuses. So here you can see that the number of incidences on campuses continue to increase each year, reaching 160 in 2016. So for this chart and in the previous 2, it's hard to speculate what the data is for 2017 and also what is happening right now in 2018. But if we look at the trends from 2013 to 2016 and assume that it has persisted, perhaps, really the numbers of it's concerning. We really have to consider that the numbers of hate crimes based on religion are increasing, and then the hate crimes towards Jewish and Muslim groups continue to increase, as well as the fact that hate crimes based on religious bias on school campuses are increasing as well. So obviously there's much to be done here. At this time, these are the statistical details that I'll share with you today. If you would like to review more of these details about bullying, discrimination, or hate crimes by state, I encourage you to visit these links at a later time. Unfortunately, so far, the hate crimes for 2017 haven't been reported and posted online yet, but this is what we have, and hopefully the 2017 data will be shared soon, and we can understand how to go from there. So now that we've understood more about religious bullying, we need to figure out how can we address it. As an educator, one big question I had in doing this whole research in my PhD is to really understand how can education address religious bullying, and can it? There are so many anti-bullying campaigns at schools, but within a public school environment, what can be done if religious bullying still occurs despite these campaigns? And that led me to learn more about religious literacy and to consider, can religious literacy, can it address religious bullying? So first off, let's consider, what is religious literacy then? So when people hear the word literacy, many people still think that it relates to reading and writing. But many educators have gone beyond that to understand that literacy is content knowledge. So knowledge about a particular subject matter, such as media literacy, art literacy, and sports literacy. So religious literacy, from this perspective then, is the ability for an individual to discern and analyze the external and internal diversity in religions. This means that externally, one can understand the differences between religions by familiarizing oneself with the basic tenets of the world religions and see that they're different this way. And internally, they can see that each religion can be understood, expressed, and practiced differently based on potential different interpretations even within that religion. So for example, we know that Zen Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism, those are both forms of Buddhism, but we also know that they're different. They have different practices and interpretations. So that is an example of the internal diversity within religions. Thirdly, religious literacy is the understanding that religions are not static in terms of the fact that they are influenced by social, cultural, political, and economic spheres of society, historically and today. And in turn, religions also influence these spheres as well. So why is religious literacy important to understand and consider? And it's really because religious literacy offers the content knowledge that is needed to address the content misunderstanding that fueled a lot of religious bullying that happens today. So when taught well, my research and that of Professor Emil Lester's from University of Mary Washington, our research has found out that religious literacy can foster respect. So theoretically, scholars such as Robert Jackson and Sabrina Dima, they know that religious literacy can foster social cohesion, and that the lack of religious literacy, based on work by Diane Moore and Stephen Prothero in the US, show that religious illiteracy can actually breed hate and violence at all levels of Bronfenbrenner's social ecology. So practically speaking now, let's consider what Professor Emil Lester and I have found in relation to this whole discussion on religious bullying. So in 2013, Emil Lester conducted a study on students from Modesto, California, because Modesto City School District in Modesto, California, is the only public school district in all of the US that has a mandatory religious literacy program in their secondary public schools. So what this program has done is, well, it was established in the year 2000 and it continues today. And due to its unique nature, which I'd be happy to talk to you about this program in particular, feel free to contact me afterward to know more about the program. But due to the nature of the program, Emil, other researchers, and myself have tried to understand the benefits or challenges to having such a program in public education. In Emil's study in particular, he surveyed students before and after the course, and he found that students, their willingness to permit the First Amendment rights towards their least liked group actually improved after taking the course. And you can see this here in all the categories. And thus his study supports the idea that religious literacy content knowledge can potentially address the content or bias that motivates religious bullying, as the course has the ability to change student attitudes towards one another. So this in turn can, again, potentially address and promote social cohesion in class or the school environment, and then in turn address the issues that breed hate and violence. While Emil's findings were positive, however, my own research in Modesto, California and Montreal, Quebec showed that religious literacy programs can be positive and negative at the same time. So I can talk again also about this at length. If you'd like to learn more about this study that I did, please feel free to reach out to me. For various, I'll just briefly describe what I found. So for various reasons, my participant sample was small in both cities, but from this data, I found that 57% of students in Modesto and 81% of students in Greater Montreal, they found that religious literacy programs were beneficial to them. However, at the same time, some individuals in both contexts also expressed a negative or ambivalent feeling and effect of the course. So from the reports on religious bullying illustrated on the slide in the top right-hand corner here, it is clear that religious programs do exist in many places, maybe not as official required course, but they do exist. However, the content for teachers or textbooks is sometimes inaccurate, and that promotes stereotypes or misunderstandings about religions instead. In other parts of those reports and in my findings, I've also found that teacher bias can taint the lessons when the textbooks are correct. So many factors really are needed to understand how to foster attitude change and the necessary content knowledge that we hope religious literacy can foster to prevent religious bullying. So really, there are a number of things that we have to consider, especially from a teaching perspective. We need important curriculum, sound curriculum, adequate teacher training, the support from administrators and teachers who are passionate to teach about religion in a neutral manner. These are the things that are needed to foster a strong religious literacy program that can potentially deter religious bullying from happening by fostering respect. So from those findings that I shared just now and the work of many other individuals, there's an understanding now that religious literacy is a growing field of knowledge and importance to consider as we seek ways to prevent and respond to many types of religious discrimination. So there's many solutions out there, and let's look at them right now. This section now, in the following few slides, I'll talk about preventative solutions that you can consider that promote different forms of religious literacy and exist in your context. So in the next few slides, 6 slides, I will briefly share the solutions that are being led by students, teachers, colleges, religious and community leaders, NGOs, and academics on how to respond or how to prevent religious discrimination happening at all. First, we begin with students. And here I'm sharing 3 examples for you. There's many, many more, but I just wanted to highlight the importance of these ones because they are student-led. And so they empower students and promote student voice. So first, let's look at Seek Kid to Kid. This is a youth-based organization for youth, run by youth, again, that started in the year 2012 after the Wisconsin Gurdwara shooting. And their philosophy really is, as stated on their website, to eradicate ignorance with the power of education. What they do is they provide a network of Sikh students across the country to support one another when things get tough, simply put, to support each other through their struggles. But in addition to supporting one another, whether it be through conversations, through dialogue, or through demonstrations that they've supported and been a part of, they also work together to educate local teachers. So what they have done is they've offered a world religions workshop for teachers on Sikhism. And together with other individuals, other teachers, they've co-developed a religious literacy course that offers teachers, specifically in the Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland. They've offered this course that provides teachers 3 professional development credits upon learning more about Sikhism and different forms of different aspects of religious literacy. So that's one example. Another example that I'd like to highlight is from a recent conversation I've had with a Hindu youth through my work with the Hindu American Foundation. I spoke with this youth who is in a southern state. He's a senior at school. And a few years ago, when he saw that there was misrepresentation of Hinduism in his textbook, he spoke up and he told his teacher. His teacher thanked him for sharing that information and actually asked him to help him better understand Hinduism overall. So this student, because he studies Hinduism at length through his personal readings, courses he's taken with the HAF, and Sunday lessons he's had from his temple, he's well versed and familiar with many aspects of Hinduism, and so he's been able to help his teacher. And that was so well received that other teachers at school actually approached him as well to seek this religious literacy training. And in both these circumstances, I really want to highlight that these initiatives are led by students again to support each other and themselves and really support what they value. And thirdly, I'd like to highlight this last example here about the work of Generation Global. So this is an international organization. What they offer is free programming for educators to enable students to speak with other classes of students in different parts of the world. So while the teacher is there at school, the conversations are held through video conferencing, and one group of students will talk to another group of students. They'll have dialogue and Q&A about cultures, identities, values, beliefs, and attitudes that they each have, as well as how that relates to current topics. And this, although it is, again, teacher supported, the students are in charge. They're the ones who are being given the opportunity to ask questions about others and also share their identity with others. So in all of these examples, it's important to highlight what youth are doing today. It's incredible. And a lot of them, yes, they have adult support, but that's what's needed. And at the same time, we need to recognize the initiatives that the youth are leading themselves and coming up with these ideas. And many different examples exist across different groups, but these are some that I encourage you to consider adapting or adopting in your area, or joining the initiatives that these students have started. The second group that I'd like to talk about are teachers. So here I've listed 3 teachers who are doing exceptional work in different parts of the US. Here we have Mr. John Tamardella in Illinois, Mr. Chris Murray in Maryland, and Ms. Sharon Froba in California. First, I'd like to talk about John and Chris. They're both world religions teachers, and they teach different aspects of social studies as well. And their classes are very well received by others. In John's experience, his classes have been so well received by students that actually parents have approached him to say, can you also offer a religious literacy program for us? So for at least the past 2 years now, he has offered courses for parents once a week in the evening. And in our conversation, it seems like it's been going very, very well. Chris Murray has done tremendous things across many different states, but one that I will highlight today is the work that he's done in Maryland. So he is a national board certified teacher, and he teaches many courses in social studies and has done so since 2005. He was actually one of the teachers who supported the establishment of the religious literacy course in the Sikh Kid to Kid organization. And you can really tell the support he's given when you speak with the organizers or the committee who runs Sikh Kid to Kid, because they'll beam when they talk about Mr. Chris Murray. And from those conversations, you can tell a little bit of the impact that this teacher has had on his students. Miss Sharon Froba, she is a retired teacher and not from a world religions teaching background, but what she's done, or what she started 20 years ago in the Modesto City School District, is something called the Day of Respect. The Day of Respect happens once a year, and each year it welcomes speakers from across the region, across the county, and some perhaps from San Francisco, to speak about their experiences and help students understand their varying identities. So this really includes many different identities across town. So such as the local imam, pastors, rabbi, and others who are maybe LGBTQ, undocumented immigrants or migrants, and those with disabilities. And here on this slide, I have a link to a PBS highlight of this program, and I encourage you to watch it just to see how tremendous the work has been and the impact it has on the community members who take part in this program, as well as the impact it has on the students. So from these 3 teachers, and there are many more, but from these 3, you can tell that these teachers work to support the community, whether it's a community of parents, students, or others in their community, and everything that they have done is led by their passion to support others and educate others beyond the classroom. The third group that I'd like to talk about is the work done in colleges, among students and among staff in colleges. So there is a lot of interfaith work actually happening in colleges. The Interfaith Youth Corps works across the US in many campuses to foster leadership and dialogue among students of various religious backgrounds. And parallel to the work of the Youth Corps is also Convergence. This organization also works across many campuses, but what they do is they work specifically with the institution to improve the climate for religious, secular, and spiritual individuals through policy and practice. Coinciding and working alongside these groups are many multi-faith centers and institutes at many colleges. They are working to offer programs, training, relationship building programs, leadership support, and research to improve religious tolerance and respect. This can be seen in organizations such as the Boniek Institute for Religious Tolerance at the Rice University in Texas. So really, while the past three groups of people are important, the group that I'm going to talk about right now may be the most important for parents and adults in each community. In my work, religious and community leaders have been the most interactive and have the most connections with local community members. And so they may be the most influential and supportive people for many adults and parents. And these individuals are doing amazing things around the country. And at the same time, just like what's happening in colleges, a lot of them are engaging in interfaith work to support each other through the discrimination that's happening in the US today. So in California in particular, I had the privilege to meet the Stanislaus County Interfaith Council. So pictured here is Imam Ahmad Caiello, Pastor Michael Scheffelbein, and Rabbi Shalom Bachner. Here is a picture of them just last week during their second annual Interfaith Prayer Supper. During this supper, they all gathered at the local Sikh temple and enjoyed an interfaith feast together. In addition to this, for at least 2 years now, they have also held interfaith Thanksgiving dinners. And when asked about what is all this interfaith work about, why are you doing it? In a recent article from a local paper called the Turlock Journal, Rabbi Bachner was quoted as saying, the Muslim community, they have gone through so much. So we thought, how can we help? And we help by getting to know each other and by modeling in our communities the respect we have for one another. And this respect and support really underlies much of this council's work and much of the interfaith groups, the work that they're doing that I've come across. In respect to religious bullying in particular, I want to highlight the work of this council in 2016. So in September of 2016, they actually approached the school board, the local Modesto City School District, to offer professional development to the local high school teachers to discuss religious bullying in particular. During the professional development session, they introduced what religious bullying is, and they also shared experiences that they had gone through themselves, as well as help individuals understand their own religious backgrounds. In this slide here, I've included a link to a video that they prepared to share with the teachers. This is approximately a 3 to 5 minute short video of anecdotes that students had shared with these leaders, and in turn they wanted to share with teachers, so the teachers were aware of what's happening in these communities. And stories there include struggles among Muslim, Jewish, and Buddhist students. This council also consists of Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Sikh, Mormon, Buddhist, and non-religious community leaders as well. The second group that I really want to highlight is the Women's Interfaith Alliance of Central Georgia. So they have a group of approximately 60 to 80 people that meet every month in Central Georgia. And a lot of you might think, okay, this is Central Georgia. Isn't that the Southern Bible Belt? I would not expect this to exist. And that I had the same feelings, honestly. And I know a lot of the women who are part of this group are also surprised at times that they have this. But it's become very dear to many of them. What they do during this interfaith meetings is they study books to understand experiences of religious individuals in specific contexts around the world. So it could be a nonfiction book, it could be a fiction book. And in addition to that, they studied the sacred texts and how each book, whether it's the Quran, the Tanakh, or the Bible, are talking about special important figures in these books. In the past, they've talked about Joseph and other figures, and I know coming up, I think they would like to speak about Jonah. So they have these meetings, and they also have monthly luncheons where they talk about important topics to them, such as the role of compassion, health and wellness, the spectrums of Christian denominations in Judaism, as well as those in Judaism and Islam. They talk about afterlife issues and constitutional rights as well. So here they're fostering relationships and also increasing their own religious literacy through these relationships and readings that they do. And many of these women, actually, they've developed very strong personal relationships and friendships with others from different religious backgrounds. So, for example, 2 years ago, one of the local mosques was vandalized, and it was actually the woman who communicated with one another to understand how the Muslim community at that time wanted to be supported and what was the best way to support them. And from these conversations between the women, they then shared the responses with the respective religious leaders. And in the end, they were able to support and respond to the vandalism that had happened. So these are just two examples of councils that are in smaller towns. There are many in bigger cities, such as the Faith Alliance of Metro Atlanta, as well as the Interfaith Center of Greater Philadelphia. So I encourage you to see what's happening in these communities. A lot of these individuals, when I speak with them, the leaders, they're reaching out, they're wanting to reach out to many people in their society, in their community, in their city. But it's difficult, and at the same time, they're already familiar with those who are interested and aware. So if you're interested, please find ways to reach out to them and look for them online. And at the same time, if you're having trouble finding them, please feel free to contact me. I'm happy to help you look for groups to be a part of as well. The fifth group that I'd like to speak about is NGOs. And this is also important for parents to be aware of what NGOs are doing, because many NGOs are trying to seek ways to empower youth, parents, the community, and they're using a multi-tiered approach relating to what we were talking about earlier with Bronfenbrenner and the social ecological framework. The NGOs are trying to approach many different groups at the same time, because we know that many groups need to be part of the solution. So I won't talk in detail about their initiatives. They have a plethora of initiatives, which are wonderful and really context specific. And I encourage you to be a part of their newsletters to see the work that they're doing. Because often they might come to your town and it would be noted in the newsletter. One thing I want to also emphasize is they are also doing a lot of interfaith work as well. A lot of them are doing interfaith work, such as ING. They're doing interfaith work with Muslim Jewish events that they host, but you can also see that in their staff. Recently, I came across an article from Kate Chance, who works with ING, and she actually shared in this article that she finds it's important for her to work with ING because she is a Christian, because this way she can work and support those who support the well-being, the religious well-being of those around her. So it's fascinating and really exciting to see the work that's being done within the organizations, as well as the work that's coming out of the organizations. The last group that I'd like to talk about today are the academics. Academics right now, their goal is always to educate, but how? Right? And so academics are finding very specific ways to educate many parts of society, whether it's online, through partnerships with governments and parents, or making foundational changes in school curriculum, which are listed here on this slide. So here in the Harvard, you can see here the Harvard Religious Literacy Project. It exists, and what they actually do is they offer programming for teachers, parents, and the public through free, massive online open source courses so that people can understand and increase their own religious literacy. At the same time, PrevNet, the Promoting Relationships and Eliminating Violence Network, they are working to promote healthy relationships so that it can address the fears that students have to report bullying. As well, there's a great emphasis to understand that healthy relationships are important to foster in a classroom setting because this fosters a trust, respect, and communication that can exist between teacher and student and between the students so that opportunities for bullying don't happen in the first place. This last group that I want to talk about is the Religious Freedom Center. They are a non-sectarian NGO comprised of academics, however. And what they did in 2017 is that the RFC worked with the National Council for Social Studies, so the NCSS, to supplement the existing curriculum that the NCSS has to include religious studies for kindergarten to the 12th grade. So as the NCSS presents curriculum standards across the US, this new inclusion of the religious studies in the C3 framework, which is a college, career, and civic life framework, shows that the academic study of religion is really recognized today as a core component of global citizenship and domestic civic life. So what the RFC has done is they've helped C3 framework be adopted so that religious literacy is understood. But not only will teachers have, hopefully, the right training, but they will now have the right curriculum to support their teaching. So these initiatives by the religious and community leaders, NGOs, and academics are important for parents and other adults in society to consider, because in my conversations, what I've noticed is when I talk to parents and adults about what's happening to youth, many of them are struggling to understand how to respond and help youth because they are experiencing discrimination in their own workplaces and in their cities. And so it's very important and increasing awareness today for all of us to know that we also need to support the parents so that they are informed and equipped so they can then support children and youth in society. So to summarize quickly the examples that I've shown you, I want to highlight two quick things. And that's firstly, that many people in the initiatives that I've come across, they all adopt this idea of love your neighbor. And of course, it's understood from their religious understanding, their background, and sometimes it's from a completely civic and secular understanding. But despite these differences, there is a growing voice in the US that shows that there is a need and desire among many communities to care for one another, regardless of religious or non-religious identities. And a lot of this can be seen in the interfaith work. Secondly, I wanted to highlight that there is an understanding that many aspects of society is needed to influence what's happening in a school. To address the many systems that influence a child's development, a multi-tiered approach is needed. And realistically, we see that this multi-tiered approach is being used and applied, whether it's among groups like Seek Kid to Kid that are working to support students, but also teachers, or even among interfaith groups that are working with many individuals, and NGOs and academics that are working with parents, policyholders, and many other people. So while the issue of religious bullying is honestly a difficult one, I hope what I've shared with you right now has been an encouraging sign of the change that is happening. Change is slow, but it is happening. And now briefly, I just wanted to summarize how what I've shared relates to the responsive solutions that many of our speakers have in this webinar series have shared, many really important responsive solutions. So firstly, well, what I've shown here is a summary of what the previous speakers have shared. There are specific and clear avenues of communication and ways to respond to religious bullying depending on where it happens. And unfortunately, many of us come across teachers, administration, leaders, and others who are not responsive. And in all these circumstances, I encourage you then, at the end of the day, if all these avenues are unresponsive, to consider seeking local support. We've talked about a lot of different groups today, local groups, who can offer support depending on the group of individuals you're working with. And I encourage you to consider them should none of these previous and prior avenues of support offer any response. In addition to these groups, I want to highlight this link at the bottom of the slide. I encourage you to review these state laws about bullying and cyberbullying, because it differs across every state, and every school district is a bit different as well. So by understanding what the laws are for your state, I hope that you'll be more equipped and feel more comfortable navigating these discussions in your context. So to conclude today, what I've done is I've informed you about the complexity in religious bullying and one potential way to address it through religious literacy, although many things that we talked about today don't look like religious literacy in its simplest form, but they do promote religious literacy and understanding. So evidently, many groups that I've shared, whether it's led by students, teachers, colleges, religious and community leaders, NGOs, or academics, many people are seeking preventative solutions. So in turn now, I hope what I've shared has given you many ideas to consider and ways that might be helpful to you in your local context. And as you consider this, I ask you to consider which type of solution is most appropriate for you. Do you want to take part in these existing solutions, or do you want to start something on your own based on the ideas that you've just heard? And so at this time, I really want to thank you very much for joining this webinar. I will share my slides with Ramiz so that you can review them and access the links directly. This slide deck also has an appendix section that you can view later. It includes information on US laws and religious bullying, and really briefly introduces you to how bullying actually can also lead an individual to adopt different forms of violent extremism. If you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to contact me at my email address here or on Twitter, or please feel free to review the details on my website. At this time, I'm now going to turn it back to Ramiz.
Thank you, Alice. That was very informative, and I hope our viewers found it informative just as well as we did. And it is available now on our website. It will be available in a few days, but it will be available on our YouTube channel, icnacsj.org/TV, and it'll take you directly to our YouTube page. So immediately after this webinar is over, it should appear in that list. And I want to thank Alice for coming out and doing this webinar for us from all the way from Canada. And I hope the viewers liked it. And we hope that you will join us again next month for our next webinar as well. And again, please help us continue to do this work for free by donating. You can go to icnacsj.org/donation to give us a donation, and we encourage you to become a recurring donor so we can have a consistency of funds so we can keep doing this work and bring more information to you. One of our goals is to create a library of information on our website on these issues and other issues related to social justice. So we hope you can be part of it. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you next month.